What if the most magical part of your garden wasn't something new, but something you were about to throw away? Today, broken pots, old cans, bottles, drawers, and scraps of wood will become tiny living worlds, miniature places where imagination breathes again. Small creations, with a surprisingly big feeling. Welcome to Mind Over Decoration, where forgotten materials become tiny stories. In this episode, we're crafting miniature fairy scenes and succulent worlds from everyday junk, pottery shards, driftwood, rusty cans, bottles, crates, and more. Each idea is simple, heartfelt, and made to remind you that beauty doesn't ask for perfection, only a little imagination. This channel isn't powered by fancy tools, just patience, creativity, and people like you who believe small things can still matter. When you watch, like, or subscribe, you're not supporting a video. You're helping a dream stay alive. Thank you for being here, and for letting these tiny worlds mean something. There is a quiet kind of magic that appears only when something broken is given a second life. Perhaps that is why spilled succulent illusions feel so enchanting, because they turn imperfections into tiny, living stories. Imagine walking into a garden and seeing an old jug, cracked and weathered, lying gently on its side. Instead of being forgotten, it becomes the beginning of a flowing river of succulents, each leaf arranged like droplets of green water frozen in motion. This illusion, simple yet mesmerizing, transforms what was once trash into a moment of wonder. A broken bowl, an old bucket, a chipped clay pitcher, all of them suddenly gain purpose again as they spill life instead of losing it. The succulents themselves play a perfect role in this story. Their trailing shapes mimic movement, their textures catch the light, and their colors shift subtly with the sun, making the illusion feel alive even when perfectly still. In these scenes, cracks become pathways. Fractures become openings. And every broken edge becomes a frame for something new to grow. These arrangements do more than decorate a porch or garden corner. They tell a story of renewal, resilience, and unexpected beauty. The background fades into a soft blur, as if inviting the eye to focus on the transformation happening at the center. The spilled succulents appear almost like a magical accident, a tiny world that continues flowing long after time has paused. When you place these illusions in your garden, you create more than decor. You create a moment, a scene that makes guests lean closer, smile gently, and wonder how something so simple could feel so alive. And maybe, just maybe, they'll notice that beauty doesn't always come from something perfect, but from something reborn. There is something poetic about an old glass bottle, clear, simple, and often overlooked. For years it may lie untouched in a corner, holding nothing but dust and forgotten memories. But when light is invited inside, everything changes. Suddenly, a bottle becomes a world, a tiny glowing home for moss, succulents, and miniature stories waiting to be told. Imagine taking a bottle destined for the trash and gently placing a strand of warm micro-lights inside. The moment the lights turn on, the interior transforms into a scene that feels alive. Soft glows bounce across the glass, reflections dance like fireflies, and the tiny plants within begin to look like characters in a fairy tale. Each bottle becomes its own universe. A green bottle glows like emerald magic, a blue one feels like moonlit water, an amber one radiates warmth like a lantern guiding someone home. The lights create shadows that stretch across miniature pathways, tiny doors, or mossy corners, inviting the imagination to wander deeper. Outside, the background fades into a soft blur of warm evening bokeh, as if the world beyond the bottle grows quiet in respect for the magic happening inside it. People who walk by these glowing scenes often pause, leaning in to understand how such a small thing can feel so enchanting. But that's the beauty, it isn't about size, it's about wonder. When a recycled bottle becomes a fairy-like garden, it stops being trash. It becomes a keeper of tiny stories, a lantern for imagination, and a reminder of how easily magic can slip into everyday life. Hanging from branches, resting on shelves, or glowing quietly along a garden path, these bottles create moments of warmth and curiosity. In the end, light finds its way into forgotten things. And when it does, the world inside the bottle begins to glow, not just with LEDs, but with the feeling of rediscovering beauty where no one thought to look. There is a quiet wisdom carried by driftwood and old branches, beauty softened by time, shaped by wind and water, and polished by the world itself. When we bring these pieces into a garden, they do more than decorate, they tell stories of where they've been and whom they might have sheltered. Add succulents, moss, and tiny handcrafted details, and suddenly the wood remembers its magic. Imagine picking up a piece of driftwood with a natural curve, its twists shaped by years of tides or storms. In your hands, it becomes an archway, a portal into a fairy realm waiting to be revealed. Little succulents nestle into grooves like ancient plants reclaiming the structure. Moss spreads softly across the surface, hinting at secret life within. Some branches form natural thrones, shaped like seats for unseen visitors. Others stretch out like bridges, inviting the imagination to picture tiny travelers crossing from one world to another. Each sculpture is unique because nature itself is the artist. You simply become the storyteller who completes the scene. As you place these sculptures in your garden, the background melts into a soft, dreamy bokeh, emphasizing the wooden forms and delicate succulents. The effect feels almost cinematic, like a glimpse into a forgotten woodland from a childhood tale. Light falls across the textures, highlighting every curve, crack, and shadow. People who see these driftwood fairy sculptures rarely walk past without pausing. They lean in, smile, and feel a spark of curiosity. The combination of rugged wood and living succulents creates the feeling that something magical could happen at any moment. It's the kind of enchantment only nature can offer, simple yet deeply moving. Driftwood is more than scrap. Branches are more than debris. In the right hands, they become monuments to imagination, guardians of small gardens, and reminders that beauty often begins with something weathered, worn, and wild. And in those moments, your garden becomes not just a space, but a story. There is something captivating about the desert, its vastness, its silence, and the way life finds a way to bloom in even the harshest places. But what if that world could be held in something as small and humble as an old metal tray? What if the desert could be brought to your table, your shelf, or your garden, in miniature form? Many desert succulent worlds do exactly that. They take discarded metal trays, rusted, scratched, forgotten, and turn them into landscapes where imagination unfolds quietly. At first glance, the tray seems too small to contain a story. But then the sand settles, the pebbles form pathways, and tiny succulents begin rising from the surface like desert survivors reclaiming the land. Every plant becomes a character. Every stone becomes a landmark. Every grain of sand contributes to the illusion of a world far bigger than the tray that holds it. A simple cluster of succulents becomes an oasis. A twisted rock piece transforms into a canyon wall. A miniature clay house suggests life hidden just beyond view. The shallow depth of field blurs the horizon, making the scene feel infinite, just like the real desert. The beauty lies not only in the realism but in the contrast. A rugged metal tray, weathered by time, becomes the foundation of a delicate and intentional world. The succulents add life where there was none. The soft warm lighting creates the atmosphere of a sunset that never ends. And once complete, the miniature desert feels strangely peaceful, even meditative. People who encounter these tiny worlds often lean in closer, surprised by how much detail can fit in such a small frame. The textures, the paths, the arrangements, they pull the viewer into a moment of quiet exploration. What once was trash becomes a landscape of imagination. And perhaps the most magical part is this: in a world that moves fast and demands much, a miniature desert reminds us that beauty can be small, still, and simple, yet feel endless. There is a kind of beauty that only time can create: rusted metal, faded paint, scratches that tell stories. Old tin cans, once tossed aside without a second thought, hold this quiet beauty. And when they are lifted into the air with trailing succulents spilling from their edges, they become something unexpectedly enchanting: small gardens floating in sunlight. Imagine walking into a backyard or porch and seeing an old can hanging gently from a rope. The metal, touched by years of weather, forms a warm earthy contrast to the vibrant greens cascading from its rim. String of pearls falls like gentle beads, burrow's tail drapes heavily in soft curves, and sedum trickles downward like a living waterfall. Every can becomes a character with its own personality. Some are rusty and rugged. Some are hand-painted, carrying the charm of something reborn. Some hold fairy doors or tiny windows, transforming them into miniature homes suspended in the air. When the breeze moves, the trailing plants sway lightly, creating motion that feels almost alive. The background fades into soft bokeh, a blur of garden greens and golden light. The cans remain the sharp focus, as if the world around them quiets just enough to let their stories be heard. These vertical hanging gardens do more than save space. They bring a sense of whimsy, warmth, and creativity to any corner they inhabit. People rarely expect something so ordinary to look so magical. A rusty can becomes a lantern. A dented can becomes a planter. A forgotten can becomes a tiny world of succulents reaching outward. The transformation feels almost like a secret whispered by the garden itself, that beauty doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for imagination. And when you hang these gardens across a wall, a tree branch, or along a porch, you're not just decorating, you're creating a floating collection of stories, each one shaped by time, revived through nature, and illuminated by simple wonder. There is a certain magic in the woods, the kind that feels ancient, quiet, and deeply alive. But sometimes, you don't need an entire forest to feel that wonder. Sometimes, all it takes is a forgotten piece of junk wood and a handful of moss to open the door to a tiny world. When you pick up a discarded plank, a hollow stump, or a broken crate piece, you might not see much at first. The edges are rough, the wood is dry, and the shape feels accidental. But that is exactly where the beauty begins. In those imperfections lie the perfect foundation for a miniature moss forest, a small world hidden within what others might throw away. As the moss settles in, vibrant and soft like tiny green carpets, the wood starts to change. It no longer looks abandoned, it looks alive. Small stones become pathways, twigs turn into fences, and little wooden doors suggest someone may be living just beyond view. Light filters through and catches the tiny textures, creating shadows that feel like whispers from a distant magical place. The background fades into a warm, dreamy bokeh, making the miniature world feel larger than it is, like a forest unfolding beyond the frame. The moss glows softly under sunlight, the wood grain becomes a landscape all its own, and the entire scene takes on a storybook quality. Guests who see these tiny forest corners often pause, captivated by how something so small can feel so enchanting. What was once junk becomes a doorway. What was once overlooked becomes a landscape of imagination. These tiny moss forests invite the viewer to slow down, lean closer, and rediscover the wonder of exploring miniature things. They turn empty corners of your garden or home into pockets of magic, worlds where fairies might wander, where tiny bridges lead somewhere mysterious, and where nature reclaims even the smallest scraps with beauty and grace. In these moments, your garden becomes more than decor. It becomes a story, quiet, whimsical, and alive. There is a kind of magic that feels impossible at first glance, water flowing from a jar that holds nothing inside. Yet when you look closer, you realize it is not about the water at all. It is about the illusion, the story, and the way your imagination responds to something so unexpectedly alive. Glass jars, humble and clear, often sit unused in corners or cabinets. But when turned forward at just the right angle, they become the beginning of a waterfall that never dries. Resin captures the motion, frozen yet flowing, while moss, stones, and succulents transform the base into a miniature world where nature seems to thrive under an endless stream. Every jar terrarium waterfall becomes a tiny landscape. A mossy hill becomes a place where droplets collect. Pebbles create paths that suggest tiny creatures might wander. A little door beside the water invites curiosity. Who lives here? What stories unfold beneath the soft glow of sunlight? The background melts into a dreamy bokeh, making the jar and waterfall feel like the center of a magical moment. Glass reflects warm light, moss absorbs soft shadows, and the resin captures movement so convincingly that viewers often blink twice just to be sure it isn't real water. What makes these miniature waterfalls enchanting is their quiet contradiction. The jar, empty yet overflowing. The water, still yet moving. The scene, tiny yet vast in imagination. It becomes a reminder that creativity can turn the simplest materials, discarded jars, forgotten driftwood, leftover stones, into worlds full of wonder. Guests who see these displays often pause, mesmerized, following the frozen flow with their eyes. They lean closer, drawn into the illusion. And in that moment, they aren't looking at a jar, they are looking at a story in motion, a river that begins in glass and ends in imagination. In these terrariums, empty jars do not stay empty. They become waterfalls, fairy landscapes, and small sanctuaries where magic is always flowing, even when time stands still. There is something enchanting about small stones, smooth, simple, and unassuming. We walk past them every day without noticing. But when placed together with intention, they become pathways that guide the imagination somewhere quieter, softer, and more magical. Pebble fairy pathways prove that even the smallest objects can create entire worlds, especially when paired with a little creativity and a bit of upcycling spirit. Imagine taking an old frame, a cutting board, or a broken tile, items destined for the trash, and turning them into a tiny landscape. You begin with a handful of pebbles. Each one is placed gently, shaping curves, spirals, stairways, or winding routes that feel like they belong in a world of miniature beings. Moss hugs the edges like soft green carpets. Succulents rise like ancient shrubs guarding the way. Even the angles of light play their part, casting shadows that make the path appear deeper than it really is. As the background fades into a dreamy bokeh, the focus sharpens on the stones. The textures become incredibly detailed, the smoothness, the curves, the small imperfections. Together, they evoke a sense of journey, as if someone tiny might appear and walk them at any moment. These scenes aren't just decorations, they are story fragments waiting to be completed by whoever gazes upon them. A pebble path can lead to a miniature door, a moss hill, or even a bridge crossing over a sand river. And even though everything is small, the world it creates feels incredibly vast. People find themselves leaning closer, drawn in by the detail and the serenity. The simplicity calms the mind, while the creativity sparks curiosity. Upcycling stones and pebbles into fairy pathways reminds us that magic doesn't always shout, it often whispers. It appears quietly in corners, on shelves, or beneath garden plants, revealing itself only to those who take the time to look. In these tiny scenes, pebbles stop being just pebbles. They become roads to imagination, thresholds to wonder, and invitations to explore hidden worlds. Greenhouses have always symbolized possibility, glass walls catching the sun, wooden frames holding space for life to grow. But when you shrink that concept into a tiny diorama made from scrap wood, something even more magical happens. The greenhouse becomes not just a structure, but a scene, a moment, a story you can hold in your hands. Imagine gathering pieces of broken wood, fragments from crates, abandoned planks, thin strips left over from past projects. None of them match. None of them are perfect. But when they come together, they form the charming frame of a miniature greenhouse, each imperfection adding character to the tiny world inside. Panels of clear plastic or thin recycled glass become windows into a small sanctuary, where succulents thrive as though protected by magic. Moss creeps gently along the corners, softening the edges and giving the feeling that nature has already claimed this world as its own. Even the sunlight seems to understand the scale, filtering in through the panels and casting delicate shadows across the miniature floor. Inside, tiny tools rest on shelves, miniature pots line the wall, and a small pathway invites the imagination to wander. Perhaps a fairy gardener steps through here at night. Perhaps this little greenhouse is the start of a much bigger story. The scene sits quietly against a soft bokeh backdrop, as though the larger world has blurred itself so the tiny greenhouse can take center stage. Guests who see it often lean closer, their eyes widening as the details reveal themselves one by one. Scrapwood, once discarded, now frames a sanctuary of life. Broken pieces, once forgotten, now build a world full of intention. These miniature greenhouses remind us of something simple yet profound: beauty doesn't require grand scale. Sometimes it needs only a handful of small materials, a spark of imagination, and a tiny structure where dreams can grow undisturbed. In these dioramas, the greenhouse becomes more than a craft. It becomes a moment of serenity carved out of scrap, and a story waiting quietly to bloom. Tin cans are some of the most ordinary objects we encounter, simple cylinders that once held food, forgotten as soon as they're emptied. But the moment you stack them, carve windows into their sides, add tiny balconies or stairways, and surround them with succulents, everything changes. Suddenly, these cans begin to rise, not as trash, but as towers of a fairy world waiting to be discovered. Imagine picking up a rusty can, rough around the edges, textured with years of use. In your hands, it becomes the foundation of a miniature tower. Another can sits on top, then another, and with each addition, the shape of a whimsical fairy dwelling begins to emerge. Moss softens the roofs. Tiny windows invite curiosity. Little steps climb the sides as if someone small might walk up them at dusk. Succulents bring life to the structure. Trailing varieties spill gracefully from balconies, while compact rosettes fill crevices like ornamental shrubs. The contrast between metal and greenery tells a story of nature reclaiming forgotten objects, and doing it beautifully. Behind the tower, the world blurs into a dreamy golden bokeh, as though the background itself knows to dim so that the fairy tower can shine. Light dances across the metal surfaces, highlighting textures and imperfections that make each tower unique. As the LEDs glow inside miniature windows, the tower feels alive, almost inhabited. Visitors who see these towers often pause with a smile, drawn into the tiny world unfolding before them. What once was trash becomes architecture. What once was overlooked becomes a story hinted at through doors too small for human hands. These tin can fairy towers remind us that scale does not limit wonder. Magic can rise from stacked scraps, from simple materials rearranged with imagination and care. And when placed in a garden or on a porch, these towers stand proudly, not as reminders of waste, but as symbols of creativity reborn. In the end, old cans don't just become planters. They become landmarks in a tiny world where imagination always finds room to grow upward. is an undeniable charm in art, how a frame can hold a story, a feeling, a world. But what happens when that frame no longer displays printed images or painted scenes? What if, instead, it becomes a home for living plants, transforming into a vertical garden that hangs like a masterpiece? Upcycled framed succulent panels bring this idea to life, merging creativity, nature, and renewal into one breathtaking display. Imagine taking an old frame, maybe one with chipped paint, scratched corners, or ornate edges dulled by time. It no longer fits a picture, yet it still holds a certain beauty. With just a bit of imagination, that frame becomes the border of a living artwork. Succulents are carefully arranged inside, rosettes forming natural spirals, trailing varieties spilling over the edges, moss filling the spaces like gentle brushstrokes. The result feels like a painting that breathes, a canvas that grows, a piece of wall art that changes with the seasons. As sunlight touches the leaves, the frame takes on new warmth. Shadows fall across the arrangement, creating depth that no traditional art can replicate. Behind the frame, the world softens into a gentle blur, a creamy bokeh that allows the vertical garden to stand boldly in focus, as if it were hanging in a gallery made of nature itself. People who see these living frames often pause longer than expected. Their eyes trace the textures, the colors, the structure. They lean in to study the tiny details, the softness of moss, the shape of each succulent, the way the frame's imperfections add character rather than detract from it. An upcycled frame is more than decoration, it is transformation. Something once discarded becomes a showcase for living beauty. Something empty becomes full again. And something that once hung unnoticed on a wall now becomes a centerpiece that sparks conversation and wonder. In these vertical succulent panels, art and nature merge seamlessly. The frame holds more than plants, it holds a small story of renewal, creativity, and the simple joy of seeing life grow where no one expected it. There is a special kind of magic hidden in broken pottery. At first glance, a cracked pot looks like the end of something, an object no longer able to serve its original purpose. But when you place those fragments upright, stack them gently, or nestle them into soil, something unexpected happens. They begin to rise, not as vessels, but as cliffs, miniature landscapes that feel ancient, dramatic, and alive. Imagine a broken terracotta pot leaning slightly forward. Its jagged edges resemble natural rock formations, shaped not by time but by accident. Into these cracks and cavities, you press small amounts of soil, planting tiny succulents that emerge like resilient cliff-dwelling plants in the wild. Moss grows along the edges, giving the impression of nature reclaiming old stone. Suddenly, an object once discarded becomes a vertical world. A cliff where imagination climbs. A tiny ecosystem built from fragments. When sunlight touches the pottery, the textures glow with warm tones. The succulents cast delicate shadows, giving depth and realism to the scene. Behind the cliff, the world softens into a dreamy bokeh, as though the miniature landscape is the only thing in focus, an entire environment compressed into a handful of inches. Some cliffs hold miniature steps carved from pebbles. Others hide tiny fairy doors at the base, suggesting that someone very small might be living inside. Some feature resin waterfalls flowing down the pottery shapes, adding movement to something otherwise still. People who encounter these pottery cliff gardens often pause, studying the details closely. There is something mesmerizing about how natural it feels, how convincingly broken pottery becomes mountains, ridges, and canyon walls. The succulents, small but vibrant, transform each crevice into a place of life. Broken pottery doesn't represent loss here. It represents potential. The beginning of a new landscape, a new story. In these miniature cliff gardens, every fracture becomes a pathway, every shard becomes a slope, and every crack becomes a place for life to take root. What was once broken now rises again, stronger and more magical than before. Bottles and jars, simple, everyday objects, often end up forgotten in recycling bins or the back of kitchen shelves. But when placed carefully along a garden edge, filled with miniature worlds, and lit softly by the sun, they become something entirely different. They become tiny guardians of pathways, silent storytellers marking the borders of a world where imagination grows wild. Imagine walking down a garden path lined with old glass bottles. At first, they seem like simple decorations. But as you look closer, you notice that each bottle holds a tiny scene, a miniature door carved into the inside, a small hill of moss, a pebble arranged like a stepping stone, or a speck-sized lantern glowing warmly. Suddenly, the bottles don't feel ordinary at all. They feel like markers of territory, fairy territory. The glass catches the sunlight beautifully. Some bottles glow emerald green, others shimmer blue or amber. Reflections bend softly over the tiny scenes within, creating movement even in stillness. Behind them, the garden dissolves into a soft, dreamy bokeh, giving the bottles a sense of importance, as though the world beyond has stepped aside to let their magic shine. Night brings another layer of wonder. Small lights hidden in jars illuminate the miniature landscapes within, turning them into lanterns that guide the imagination forward. Each bottle becomes a tiny world of its own, a micro-terrarium, a hint of a story, a whisper of something that might exist just beyond sight. People who encounter these borders often pause, kneeling down to peer inside one bottle after another. It feels like opening pages of a book with no words, only images, each one giving a clue to a realm just out of reach. The succulents add life, the moss adds warmth, and the tiny details invite curiosity. These borders turn old glass into gateways. They transform trash into tales. They mark the edges of gardens not with lines, but with stories. In this world, bottles don't simply sit on the ground. They stand as the quiet keepers of magic. There is a special wonder in objects that return to life, especially those built from pieces once considered useless. Old metal sheets, rusty cans, broken grates, twisted wire, materials that seem too far gone to matter. But when shaped into lanterns and paired with warm light and small gardens of succulents, they reveal a beauty that feels almost mythical. Imagine lifting a piece of metal scrap from a forgotten corner. It's cold, dented, and coated in rust. Yet when transformed into a lantern, something magical happens. The metal becomes a frame for light. Perforations become constellations. And the glow that spills through them turns an ordinary object into a beacon of warmth. The succulents add a gentle softness to the rugged metal. Their rounded leaves contrast the harsh lines and textures, creating harmony between nature and the industrial past. Moss fills in the gaps, hinting at forgotten places reclaimed by life. When the lantern lights up, everything comes alive. Tiny shadows dance across the surface, silhouettes stretch across the ground, and the succulents look like part of a tiny otherworldly garden. The background melts into a soft, cinematic bokeh, golden dots of distant lights or blurred forest greens. The lantern stands in crisp detail, drawing the eye like a small magical artifact placed at the edge of a path. At night, the glow deepens, giving the impression that someone, or something, small and unseen might be using this lantern to guide their way. Visitors are always drawn to these creations. They lean closer, enchanted by the interplay of rust, light, and greenery. They wonder how something so rugged can feel so gentle. How something discarded can become a centerpiece. How scrap metal can hold so much soul. These lantern planters remind us of the quiet truth that beauty doesn't fade with age or wear, it simply waits for the right hands to reveal it again. When scrap metal learns to glow, it tells a story not of what it used to be, but of what it has become, a vessel of light, life, and possibility. Old drawers and crates carry a history of their own, once filled with belongings, tools, memories, or scattered keepsakes. When their original purpose fades, they often end up discarded, unnoticed. But with imagination, these wooden shells become the foundation of something far more magical, multi-level fairy villages where miniature worlds unfold in every corner. Picture a drawer tipped slightly upward, moss draping over its edges. A tiny stone pathway winds across its surface, leading to a miniature house tucked into the corner. Add another drawer on top, and suddenly the world grows taller. Homes stack like hillside cottages. Bridges form connections between levels. Succulents spring from small openings, acting as ancient forest trees rising within a fairy settlement. Each drawer becomes a neighborhood. Each crate becomes a platform. And each level tells a story. The wood's age becomes part of the charm. Scratches resemble terrain. Worn paint evokes history. The imperfections make the village feel alive, as though tiny inhabitants have been living there for centuries. Soft warm lighting, whether from small lanterns, LED points, or glowing resin windows, turns the entire scene into a cozy magical town. As viewers approach, the background melts into a dreamy bokeh. The drawers remain in sharp focus, standing like scenic terraces in a miniature world. People often lean closer, their eyes tracing the details, the small books in a fairy library, the glittering steps of a spiral staircase, the delicate succulents placed as trees or rooftop gardens. These upcycled villages remind us of something profound, that forgotten objects don't need to stay forgotten. A drawer once holding ordinary items now holds wonder. A crate once ignored becomes a home for imagination. The transformation is stunning, not because the materials are expensive, but because the story is. In these multi-level fairy towns, drawers no longer store things. They store worlds. And crates no longer carry weight. They carry magic.